Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I'm going to be answering your questions, any sort of challenges that you're having with building your projects or learning how to code or getting some users, whatever it might be. Today, we're going to talk about those questions like I do on these live streams. I do intend to have and do more of them. So if you are interested in them, check out cfe.sh/live. That will take you here whenever I end up doing these live streams. And of course, this kind of means that you've subscribed to my YouTube channel. That's probably the easiest way to get notifications when I do go live. So, what I want to do is answer any questions you might have. So, please let me know where you're from. That helps, of course. Let me know what issues you're having, whether it's like even just deciding what programming language to start learning, or it's deciding what ideas that you have and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, come by, say hi, here to chat. Thank you, XZA Tech. Appreciate it. From India, Abhishek. Abhishek, is that how I pronounce your name? Hello, welcome. I think we've talked before. I feel like we have. From Uganda, nice to meet you. From Greece, awesome. Jersey, baby, nice. My brother lives in Jersey. Where, I'm assuming New Jersey. Where in New Jersey do you live? From India, sweet. Where in India? Hi, hello, welcome everyone. Nigeria, nice. Ukraine, hey, how's it going? Hopefully you're safe out there, man. That's something else that's going on in your country. From India, nice. Bangladesh, Ireland, sweet. Randolph, New Jersey. I have not been to Randolph yet. I've been to Verona. That's where my brother lives. It's a cool little town. Randolph, I don't even know where it is in relation to Verona. India, haven't been to India yet. You want me to have an India visit? I probably should at some point, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon because I've got a young kid. I have 3 young kids actually, but especially one young kid that's not quite one yet. So not going to be traveling super far anytime soon. Let's see here. Okay, cool. So from Cameroon, cool. How can you scale your PHP app? Okay, cool. So the great question. So how do you scale it? Does it mean that you have a lot of traffic? To me, the first thing, the logical thing would be to Dockertize it, put it into a container, and then put it on something like Google Cloud Run. So it's a serverless container application that actually runs on Kubernetes. After you do that, use Kubernetes. That would be my recommendation right now in 2022 to simplify the whole process without getting into creating your own load balancers and doing all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, good question. Morris County, nice. Not sure what that is. Dominican Republic, hello. Jesus. South Africa, nice. Mathuba, is that how I pronounce your name? I heard the Festivals of Colors in India is amazing. I've heard the same. Family first, Vin Diesel. Yeah, except it's my actual family, not a bunch of people I race cars with and steal stuff with. I haven't seen Fast and Furious in some time, so I'm sure that's what they still do to some degree. But that's really funny. Thanks. I appreciate that you enjoy what I do. I enjoy it too, and I'm glad it actually does end up helping people. Deploy Django with Apache or Nginx, which is better? They both have been great tools for being your web server. Personally, I used Apache for a really long time until I really understood Nginx. Now I always recommend Nginx. So Nginx is by far, in my opinion, a lot easier to configure and a lot easier to implement things like load balancers. And I think it's probably the more used one at this point. So good question. What project is best to add to the resume? A complete one, like actually do an entire project and put it on your GitHub, add that to your resume, talk about it, do as much of it as you possibly can think of in terms of features, testing, and maybe even deploying it. All of the things that you might think of in terms of Django and projects themselves. You know what I mean? 'Mean? 'Hi from Pakistan. What's up? Cool. Ireland, nice. From India, hello. Where in India? Nice. From India, cool. 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 W Uh, Great. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you coming out. Let me know if you have any questions or anything, because that's why I'm here. Looks like we're all caught up on the chat. I don't think I have slow chat on. Maybe I do. Let me just double check so you guys can just. Nope, no slow mode. Great. Uh, Good stuff that there's no slow mode. It looks like I still have been having some technical issues with StreamYard, as in it's going a little slow on some of the questions. And I'm trying to be on top of them so I don't spend too much time on any given question where I don't necessarily, get to your question. I want to get to your questions. That's why I have these is to answer your questions. Of course, I love hearing where you all are from as well, because it's like pretty amazing that we can have these chats in real time. Hi, should you learn TensorFlow or PyTorch? So I think what you should learn is creating neural networks, maybe with NumPy. There's a really good book for this from Manning Publishing and specifically the author Andrew Trask. He shows you how to do deep learning with NumPy, because once you learn how to do it from the fundamental level, it's a lot easier to start bridging out from there. I would also recommend maybe you go the other direction, which is using a framework like Keras or Fast AI. If you do Keras or Fast AI, they are TensorFlow and PyTorch, respectively. Um, it's a lot easier to sort of implement some of the features of neural networks from there, and then you get deeper and deeper into the tools themselves, like TensorFlow or PyTorch. But they're both great. They both have a lot of promise. They both do a lot of things. PyTorch, I think, has been a little bit more Pythonic, but um, overall, I think they're both great tools. So pick one and just go for it. Any Django tuts anytime soon? Yeah, so I don't have a real strong need for it. If you have ideas, please let me know. As far as like what exactly you want to see in that, that way I can have a better idea. When am I starting a new course on YouTube? Yeah, thanks for your patience. Really appreciate it. I have a bunch of new courses coming out on my website. That's why I'm here on YouTube to answer questions. Like, as in, how do I help you guys, even though I'm not publishing stuff on YouTube lately? Um, so yeah, I do intend to have some more courses on YouTube in the near future. I just don't have a good timeline as to when just yet, because I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. Thanks for your patience. I really appreciate it. How can you handle multi-type authentication, for example, student, teacher, and more? Yeah, so it's still authentication, right? So what the user is, like what their role is on the application, is still sort of application. Like it's still the same sort of authentication, right? So you're still going to have a username, whether that's an actual username or an email, and then you'll have a password. And then from there, you can assign different user types from them. Personally, what I do is I extend the Django user model if I need more data from it. I don't customize it all the time. Or what I'll end up doing is have the groups. I'll end up using groups, Django groups, for those different user types. And then from Django groups, I might also extend those as well. So hopefully that gives you some sort of clarity as to what's going on there. You are a React developer and you do not understand CSS. Can you suggest how to make it easy? If I could tell you how to make CSS easy, I would absolutely be probably incredibly wealthy because of the number of classes I could make to make CSS easy. I think there's a part of CSS that is easy, like coloring things, just making padding and stuff like that. But then to do CSS well, that is the part I think you're asking to make easy. That is actually very, very challenging. So I end up using CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Tailwind in the vast majority of my projects. But I do know that there's a lot of good teachers out there for CSS. So you just need to find them. CSS is definitely not the thing that I'm incredibly strong at. I like spending the time in the logic and the data and the infrastructure and getting like web applications built, where CSS, I think, has a technical side to it, but it also has a very creative side for like visual design and stuff like that. It's things that I don't spend a whole lot of time on because I like these other things. So you want to learn data structures. So can you suggest a language, Python or Java? Yeah, so I would recommend Python just to simplify things. However, both of them you can learn data structures with. Python is just, you don't have to spend as much time learning all of the syntax nuances to start learning data structures. Syntax book for neural networks. Yeah, neural networks from scratch, I think it's called. I actually have not read his book. I probably should. Harrison's a great teacher, and his book is probably fantastic. I think I saw a couple of the videos that he did in relation to the book, also very good. So that would be. I think he also takes that approach of NumPy as well. Like I said with Andrew Trask, I personally just got a lot from Andrew Trask's book, and I recommend it constantly. But I'm sure Syntax has a great book as well. I just haven't read it. That's all. How do you rate partnership with partnering React with Django REST framework? More trouble than necessary. Yes, that's a good question, Brian. So as far as integrating React with Django, for example, if you need to integrate React with Django, the Django REST framework makes it easier if you know what you're doing. It can also make it a lot harder if you don't know what you're doing, right? So you can absolutely serialize Django views using a JSON response. So this is without the Django REST framework. My series on the Django REST framework on my YouTube channel right now, the newest one, I believe I cover this, but the idea here is you can turn any given database object into JSON data with the model to dict function that's in Django. React reads that JSON data. That's essentially what's going on. However, building an API and then building a front end framework or the entire front end in React is not trivial. There's a lot to it to make that happen. That I often just go for HTMX these days. React is great. There's a lot of really good stuff about it, but adding React and the Django REST framework when all you really want is a dynamic reloading function or component, HTMX just makes that like nonsensically easy, if that makes sense. So yeah, but it's a really, really interesting learning problem, right? So I do recommend that you learn it if you get the chance. Now, guys, I'm not going to be on super long today, but I will try to answer as many questions as I can. I've got a pretty full day, but I definitely wanted to jump on, and I'm trying to do this more regularly. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I would imagine you're all subscribed if you're watching this, right? Like if you're not, why not? What do I need to do to get you to subscribe? Um, just kidding. Probably not going to do that. Anyways, so can I give some freelancing tips with respect to Django? Yeah, so have a big portfolio on GitHub. That's one thing. Have a lot of projects on there that solve either a collection of problems or one specific problem really, really well. It doesn't have to be Django. It can be Python. It can be all sorts of things. From there, you'll have at least some work that you can draw off of. And then you can go on freelancing websites and all that. Like freelancing websites, I think the trick there is volume. You just have to do a lot of work to start to get a lot of results from it. And I actually think freelancing goes that way anyway, unless for some reason you shortcut it and you're able to move beyond the basic freelancing work and then go to the higher level ones. For example, I have a really strong feeling that if I wanted to do freelancing, I can make a pretty good living doing it for a number of reasons. But one of them being that I have just so much content out there that if someone was going to hire me with freelancing, they're going to be like, oh, wow, this guy really knows this stuff. So we should hire him. I mean, that may or may not be true for the people that are hiring freelancers, but I think it tends to be true. So the more you put out there as far as work is concerned, what you learned, what you worked on, the better it's going to be for you, whether you're freelancing or you're trying to get a job or partner with people. Cool. Let's see here. I got a super chat. Thank you, Ahmad, for the super chat. Much appreciated. You're a front-end developer, React, and you want to know, or you also know Python. I want to go in the back end. So Node.js, Fast API, Flask, or Django. Okay, so if you're a front-end developer, that probably means with React, that probably means you know JavaScript incredibly well. If you want to learn Python, absolutely learn Python and use Django. The reason you use Django is because it has user management and database integration and ORM already built into it. That being said, if you don't want all of the nuts and bolts that Django provides, you can do Fast API. I kind of shy away from Flask these days because Fast API has a lot of momentum. So if I'm going to go one with batteries included, it's going to be Django. Without batteries included, it's Fast API. That's, of course, on the Python side. but you sound like you know JavaScript really well. So I would recommend that you do Node.js. Something like Express.js is a really simple and easy way to get going with your backend. So that's exactly what I would do if I was you because of that JavaScript background. I personally really like Python stuff, so I don't necessarily spend a lot of time in JavaScript backends. But once you need the batteries included, whether it's JavaScript or Python, if you need the batteries included, I think Django is the clear winner. Whether or not you're using or JavaScript super well, right? I haven't found a really good replacement for Django in JavaScript. Maybe someday, just haven't seen it yet. Thanks for the super chat and great question. Let's see here. Going back up, what is the best JavaScript library for a beginner to start with in 2022, 23? Vanilla JavaScript. It will always be the best to start with. Once you learn the fundamentals of vanilla JavaScript, then you can look at something like React.js or Vue. I really like React.js a lot, but if you don't know the fundamentals, like a lot of things about React are going to be really hard. That being said, I think a lot of tutorials actually do cover the fundamentals of JavaScript while writing React. Like if you don't know how to do a class or a function or, changing variables or string substitution, if you don't know how to do those things in JavaScript, definitely learn those things and then come back to React itself and look for functional components. Class-based components in React are a lot more complicated than they really need to be, which is why function-based components were created. I don't even know if anyone talks about class-based components anymore in React. Maybe. Anyways, good question. Please do at some point Django, Ajax, and jQuery. Wow, this is a throwback. Okay, so jQuery itself is kind of like on its way out, right? It had its peak. It's still used a lot, but it's kind of on its way out because what it's doing is it's manipulating the web page. The DOM is what it's called. It's manipulating the web page, and it does add some interactivity, but there's other tools that do this much better. So Django and HTMX, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen because I talk about it a lot. HTMX and Django are the current modern replacements for jQuery altogether. What you end up doing is you end up rendering an actual HTML page instead of trying to modify what's already on there or a component of HTML instead of modifying what's on there. So yeah, I think skipping where'd your question go? I think skipping jQuery is probably a good idea, right? And then as far as getting external API stuff, Django can work with any sort of Python package, so you can use requests to go out there and grab requests that get you all of that as well, which is pretty cool. Substitute Node.js streams in Django, substitute for it. So is it WebSockets? I'm trying to remember if it's WebSockets or not. If it's WebSockets, then there's a lot of support for WebSockets in Django. Django channels is a good example of that. So hopefully that answers your question. Best package to generate PDFs from HTML. You're seriously struggling from the Puppeteer package. That's a good question. I haven't had to do this in some time, and I feel like I did have something on my blog, on my Coding for Entrepreneurs blog. Let's see if I have it. So cfe.sh, just go there and go to the blog, do a quick search for render to template or render a PDF, something like that. And that hopefully will help you find how to do that. Yeah, it's been some time since I've needed to. So thanks for the question. That's a good one. I need to come back to that. I think Puppeteer was a little bit more challenging. Django REST framework or Flask, easier for faster APIs. So it depends on what you're trying to do, right? So if you need authentication at all, I think Django and the Django REST framework is the way to go, personally. There's a lot of things that you have to know about Django to get use out of the Django REST framework, really. So if you're just doing pure APIs, Flask or Fast API is incredibly fast, and you can totally do that. So maybe it's that. Yeah. Good question. Reasonable EBITDA multiple for acquisition of development shops. Looking to merge multiple software development businesses. Geez, I do not have an answer there for you. Sorry. I could come up with one, but I don't think it'd be a very good one. What have you been thinking, I guess. Then I'll maybe elaborate from there. Can I make a course on Django tenants? What is it that you're trying to do, Donald, as far as Django tenants is concerned? I'm very curious about that because a lot of the things that people want multi-tenant applications for with Django is really just assigning data to specific users, and that's accomplished with foreign keys. You don't need to have a truly multi-tenant architecture with Django. You can just assign user data and query it as such. Can I explain types of serializers in Django? Yeah, so you can serialize data, which means taking it from one form to another, um, essentially in multiple ways, right? So the first thing is taking a Django model object and then turning it into a Python dictionary. They're really close to being able to do that, but Django has a built-in method for this called model to dict, and you can actually turn that into a Python dictionary. Once it's a Python dictionary, then you can turn it into JSON, and those are forms of serialization. Hopefully that answers your question. Hello there. Can you please share Andrew name in the chat? Yes. Let's see here. Let me just put it in. It's Andrew Trask, like X-Men. Andrew Trask and grokking deep learning on Manning. Cool. It's in the chat. It's in the chat. I think it's a fantastic book. Absolutely. Can you use Django for backend with Flutter? Yes. So any sort of client-side language that includes your phone, right? So your phone is a client. Any of those can use Django, right? So React.js can consume a Django API. iOS can consume a Django API. Basically, the API side and the client side can absolutely be separate. In a lot of cases, they should be separate where they don't touch each other at all. Good question. Have you been building mobile apps with Flutter? No, I have not been, but check out the YouTube channel called Coding with Mitch. Mitch Tabian, he's a friend of mine. He does a lot of stuff with Flutter and Android and all sorts of things there. Definitely check out his stuff. He also does a few things with Django, so that might help clarify that. I'm not sure if he's done a Flutter and Django app. That'd be a good question for him. But Coding with Mitch, which is funny because my last name's Mitchell, his first name's Mitchell. But anyways, he's a good guy. Definitely recommend his stuff as well. Is there a good video compression library for React Native? Also, would you prefer to encode or compress video on the front end or the back end? Okay, so when it comes to compression or any sort of video analysis, your devices, your physical devices will almost never be as powerful as a server can be, right? We're getting closer and closer. But the thing is, as we get closer on our devices, right? So I have an iOS 13 here, or excuse me, an iPhone 13 here. This device could do a lot with video analysis, absolutely. But the thing is, so can my server. My server can actually do significantly more. But there's obviously a trade-off. Videos are big, and therefore it's a lot harder to figure out exactly what to do with them. So personally, I would take it on the backend side. I would try my best to bring it to the backend if the users can do that. Now, in many cases, the users can't do that. You need to actually keep it on device because of, well, a number of reasons, right? So internet connection is one thing. The file size is another thing. The speed is another thing, right? So you got to figure out what's the most important value part of that. And if you can, put it on the back end. I don't actually have a good video compression library that I know of for React Native. It's been some time since I need to do that. But you can use all sorts of ones on the back end, on the server side, and all that. Good question. Man, I need to spend more time with React Native, I think. But man, there's just like so much time in a day and so many opportunities and things that I want to get going. You need help with setting permission to a subscription service. How about you go about doing it? Say it's a type of subscription that you can't have more than 3 foreign key objects. Interesting. I'm not sure exactly the best way to give you an example here. My thoughts would be to use Django Guardian. I'm assuming you're using Django. Django Guardian is a great package that allows you to do per object permission. You could also use the built-in permissions. But with 3 foreign key objects per object permission might make the most sense. Um, yeah, hopefully that helps make sense. You're struggling to change your function-based views to class-based views. Do I have any tips or learning resources? Yes. So on my website, the class-based views unleashed series goes into this exactly. I'm sure I covered it in other places as well, but that's more specific for it. But the thing is, a class-based view is just a shortcut to handling various HTTP methods, right? So a get method, a post method, and all that. So the class itself, at its core, has a get method, for example, if you want to render out a page on that get method. So that get method is identical to a function-based view with the exception that it's inside of a class. So it also references the class instance itself, right? So what you want to learn about is how to turn a function-based view into just the get method on a class-based view. Once you do that, then you can start to abstract things from that function or that function-based view. You can start to abstract things like, hey, get object, for example. You can put that as another instance method and really start to learn and unpack what's going on the class-based views. Once you have a better sense of that, then you can start moving on to the generic ones where they like already do all those things for you. Hopefully that helps answer your question there. Um, hey, cool. You got someone that can help you with it. Sweet. Hey, from Nigeria. Nice to meet you. Uh, Adjoy? Adjoy? I don't think I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sorry about that. But thanks for saying hi. Happy to answer the question I'm on. Yeah, other people from Nigeria. Awesome. Is Agora the new future? Agora. Oh, Dennis Ivy works there or helps them out. He, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't spent enough time with Agora. I really personally have liked Twilio a lot in the past. But again, I haven't spent enough time with Agora to give it a proper shot. So thanks for the question. Oh, Agora is something completely different. Let me just check this out. Is it a JavaScript framework? Agora JS? No. I don't see anything related to Agora JS. So tell me if there's things that I'm missing there because Agora is not a framework like React or Vue. So, or maybe you're just a buddy of Dennis's and you're here to get me to talk about Agora. I don't know. If you want to implement something, you search for a package or build your own in Django. So, me personally, both, both and. Usually, there's a package. Sometimes the package is not current, in which case you can fork that package on GitHub or copy it basically, and then improve it, and then maybe re-release it. I don't do that much because it's a lot to maintain open source packages, which is why some of these don't get maintained. And I end up building a lot of the things that I want to build in Django as well, because it's also a learning opportunity and then also something that I can share and teach you guys about, like what we're doing here. Is PyScript ready for production applications? I don't believe so. I believe it's still in beta. Now, those of you who haven't heard of PyScript, it's writing Python in a web browser, much like you write JavaScript in a web browser. It's really fascinating and potentially something that's going to be a huge deal in the future. We will see. Can we use Django REST framework with the Django front end instead of Ajax or React? Oh, this is a great question because it's like maybe diverging as to what the Django REST framework is doing. So an API itself, well, you can use that to be consumed by other software, right? That's essentially what REST APIs do. Other software, whether it's React, whether it's iOS or something like that. The Django REST framework is not necessary. You don't need the Django REST framework to have a full-on, full-stack web application in Django. Django itself has an internal API that can be rendered in a template. That template could be HTML to actually show your page, right? That doesn't need the Django REST framework at all. They can work in tandem, and a lot of projects do that, but they don't need to. From there, once you have a rendered template, you can absolutely use things like jQuery or vanilla.js, or you could use React or Vue and stuff like that too, that don't necessarily consume APIs from the Django REST framework or from Django at all. So hopefully that answers your question, but there's a lot to unpack there that I could definitely do, but it really depends on what more you want to learn. So let me know. You'd love to master deployment, knowing I have searched your video database for deployment. Yes, there's a lot to deployment, right? There's a lot of steps necessary to learn. And I definitely cover Django deployment a lot on my website. So cfe.sh. So the thing is with deployment is it's about trying to do a lot of things at once. So I recommend doing as many managed services you can as your early days, right? That is managed database, right? Obviously, you're going to use a cloud provider, but a managed database that includes like Postgres or managed Redis if you need that. Those things I recommend that you do. Next, go to a virtual machine and try to get your application running on a virtual machine, period. Right? Just get it working on a virtual machine, whether it's on Linode, DigitalOcean, AWS, wherever you can get a virtual machine, get it running there, and then expose port 80 to the internet and see if you can get that working. Once you get that working, try to implement a security certificate and see if you can get that working. Once you get that working, get Nginx going. You'd probably want Nginx before a couple of those things, but there's a lot of things that we could talk about there. So definitely ask me more questions if you want to know. Can I do a tutorial on HTMX and the Django REST framework? Yeah, so these are sort of at odds with each other. The HTMX renders an HTML template. The Django REST framework renders JSON. It does not render an HTML template. So they don't really need to work together. You can absolutely use HTMX without the Django REST framework whatsoever, which is cool. Can someone have a one-on-one session with you? I don't do one-on-one sessions right now, but if people are really interested, maybe I could do actual group sessions where it's kind of like a proper university class, if you will. That takes a lot more of my time. So not sure if I am going to do something like that, but if enough people want it, then maybe we can all do the investment and make that happen. But one-on-one sessions is just far too hard for me to do that at this time for so many reasons. But one of the biggest ones is like nobody else gets to benefit from the one-on-one sessions. This is why I do the distributed learning that I have been doing for the past 10 years. Anyways, what authentication package would you suggest? Any sort of SSO auth package. Django All Auth is my favorite in Django. SSO single sign-on, if you're not familiar. There's like a number of them out there. I just tend to use Django REST framework, Django All Auth for a lot of my projects. But there's also like third-party services that are pretty good. I think Auth2Zero is one of them. That might be one that you check out. Sorry for Django. I don't remember the context on that one. Hello, in Django, what is the best way to log in with the built-in or Django All Auth? Hey, I think I just answered this. The built-in method or the built-in form for login is really easy to do, but Django All Auth gives you additional configuration potential if you want to implement it at some point. Great question. Why are developers are not focusing on the basics of programming? No one knows what Turing complete, but they want to know Python. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Sorry. But learning the fundamentals is important. Absolutely. And I would agree with you there. Is Fast API better than Django? They serve different purposes, right? I think they're both for web applications, but Django has all the batteries included. Fast API does not. So that's kind of it, right? Like, I mean, if you want user authentication and an ORM built into it, Django's the way you go. Fast API has those things, but they're all third-party packages. And when they're all third-party packages, they don't all necessarily cohesively work super well. But then also in the future, as new versions come out, that might break things. Where Django itself, like the actual core team behind Django, is going to continue to improve all of the things that work with Django, right? Where Fast API, great package, but it's not really concerned about the Fast API user model that some third-party package is using. Perhaps they want to continue to support it, but they're not doing it directly where Django is. So they serve different purposes. Fast API is the other thing is they can do the exact same thing, right? So like given enough packages and enough experience, they can all do the same thing. So better is definitely relative there. So yeah. Hopefully that helps. Any way to create Django as a real web scraper, e.g., the user clicks a button and data will be displayed one by one, like when we use the print function. Yeah, so like an asynchronous Django web scraping tool, that is absolutely possible. It's something I covered in some detail on the supercharged async um, web scraping. I believe that's what I call it on my website, where you do asynchronous scraping and shoot, is that the one? And then I think I use Celery to store it into Django, but I actually don't remember. Oh man, I do too many projects probably. But there definitely is a way to make all that happen. I guess that's really what your question is. When to choose GraphQL over REST API with Django? I read that GraphQL is it's a lot more flexible than REST. It absolutely is. So GraphQL, you ask for what you want to one single endpoint. REST API tells you what you want to various endpoints. So there's a lot of flexibility. But with the flexibility of GraphQL also comes into the inherent risk of exposing too much data right off the bat. Where REST API, you can really narrow down the data itself. You know what I mean? So that's certainly something to think about. So when to choose is when you really need the flexibility in your queries. You don't know what data is going to be needed in advance, right? But you can also use them in tandem, right? So you can definitely use both GraphQL and REST API. Um, they're just concepts, really. I mean, you could probably make up your own new one too if you wanted to, if you were crazy. Just kidding. Professional face puncher, what's up, man? That's such an interesting name. Like I say all the time, I'm glad you made it this time. Good to have you back. How to consume Django REST API with HTML. What you end up doing is you use JavaScript to consume it. That's pretty much it. You are singularly the best Django teacher on Django on YouTube. I can't read though. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoy my courses and I've been able to be helpful. I have been doing it for some time, so it's great to see that I still have fans out there. Much appreciated. Can we make static websites with Agora? Yeah, I think you work for Agora, Suman. I don't know because you probably I have no idea. Maybe there's something in Agora that I don't know about. Probably is. How to handle free trial and monthly subscription with Django. Um, this is there's a lot of different approaches to this, but you can use permissions to do so, and you can put users in groups. So there's built-in groups in Django. You can put users in a free group and users in a like a subscription group or a monthly group, and then you can provide them different things based off of the group that they're in, and sort of serve that as a standard permission object there. You could also use something like Django Guardian if you want to get more specific, or you can also assign actual permissions on any given group. But that adds a little layer of complexity that just adding them to a specific group doesn't do so. Anyways, how to learn distributed systems with hands-on practice. This is a good question. Do you mean distributed like Kubernetes? So you have a bunch of different microservices? If you do, there's a lot of stuff on Kubernetes. Or do you mean the like Web3 stuff? Because those are distributed as well. And I think I answered this earlier, Alex, but Nginx is what I prefer over Apache for pretty much every sort of web serving, included on Kubernetes. Back to the permission things. You read Django Guardian, but you can write scripts. Yeah, not sure what you mean by here in the serializer method. So you can pass the request and thus the request user into a serializer to check whether or not it's valid. Hopefully that answers that question. Any insights of image optimization techniques with Django? Yes, so you can use the Python image library or PIL as a sort of processing unit. So what I would do if you're doing a lot of images is I would try to do as much as I can on the client side using JavaScript to narrow down the image. Then when they upload it, what you could do then is have a Celery worker process that allows you to then use the Python image library or PIL or Pillow, as it's also referred to as. You can use that to then like compress the image even more and store them. You can store both the compressed image and the other one as much as you need. But I would use Celery as a way to sort of manage that process as a worker process to optimize those images. I'm assuming that's sort of what you mean. Group session. Yeah. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Rodolfo. No, that's not how you spell it. That's not how you say it, is it? Maybe it is. You tell me, because you're from Mexico, so it's probably pronounced a little bit different, but I'm glad I could help. How do you do time zone? Oh, man, that's a huge, huge topic. Django has a utility function called time zone. Does that help? How do you do time zone in Django and you want to use it in Celery Beat? Yeah. So, yeah, Django has native time zone stuff in there. Rahul, I'm glad I helped. What about GUnicorn? Yeah, so Nginx would sit on top of GUnicorn. Nginx routes it to GUnicorn. You don't expose GUnicorn itself to the world. Nginx handles that part. I suppose you could expose GUnicorn, but I recommend using Nginx on top of it. It's just another layer. Cool. I'm actually like caught up to all the questions. We've done pretty good today. Thanks so much, guys. I see that maybe there's just a slowdown. Not as many questions. I rarely keep up, but I'll answer a few more, and then we'll sort of call it a day. Any suggestions for caching and update cache when object model is updated? Yeah, so there's Django Redis cache. So using Redis with caching is a good idea. You can cache all sorts of things, including a view, and you just want it to be on some sort of a good enough interval so that it doesn't have to hit the database too often for any given view. You can cache query sets as well, and then you can also delete that same cached object whenever you need to also. So there's a huge topic that we could have here. Can Apache Kafka integrate with Django? Yes, I believe so, or the Django REST framework. Like, really, you're asking if it can integrate with Django. The Django REST framework is just a package that is built on top of Django. It's not like a separate thing. You still need Django, but I believe they do integrate. Last I checked, they did, and they can work fine. Is it better to be a generalist or a specialist when learning a particular language? It depends on what your goals are, right? I'm probably more of a generalist than a specialist, even though it might sound like I'm a specialist. I could build web applications in a lot of different things. The thing that's nice about being a generalist is you can see some of the strengths and weaknesses of different languages. But the benefit of being a specialist is then you can then better articulate the value of certain things, and you can probably write better code at the end of the day in that particular language. So it's really up to what you're interested in. And I don't know if either one will ever be actually better because every business has different needs. To me, I think if you want to spend all your days in one specific topic and get super deep, there's a lot of value in that. While also saying if you want to spend your time in a lot of different topics and not get super deep, there is a lot of value in that as well. So you can start to see a bigger picture. Me personally, I like seeing that bigger picture than getting too much in the weeds, right? Like, I'm not writing C Python myself. I'm not going into the depths to optimize Python itself. And that's not something that I'm particularly interested in at this time. But there definitely are people that love doing that. A user cannot make more than 3 blog posts on a basic sub and 10. Oh, yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So what I would do here is I would add some sort of querying to the clean method on a form, on a Django form. I'm assuming that's what we're talking about, or the clean or the validate method on a serializer, either one that takes into account the user that's trying to do this, and then give them the warning right then and there, right? So you do a query set method, you look for the count. If they have more than 3 or more blog posts and they don't have a specific user account type, then you would say that. And when they log in, what you can do is enrich that user session. They log in, you enrich the session, you do request.session. Like, you can give them like how many posts that they have left for that entire session. And then you can just reset that if they update their account at any time. Hopefully that answers your question. You have a queue object search that searches all fields within pagination. How do you create a dropdown of your category field besides a search bar where users can select and get results? Okay, so man, I just covered this on my recommender series on my website. So the recommender series does this dropdown where you can pick different categories. Django itself has a choice field or the text choices they can use with the char field. That is what I do. I use these text choices and then use that in a view for the dropdown. Your queue object search, you might want to potentially rethink how that queue object search works if you're going to be using a dropdown category method as well. Because the queue object might, especially if you're trying to do foreign keys and stuff like that, that might not be the best method for you with a search. Hopefully that gives you some things to research. But basically the dropdown itself, I would base off of the Django choice field itself, unless you have a lot of categories, in which case then I would be caching the category results, enriching the view, or adding it into your context objects as your dropdown. Can Django permission be used for that kind of permission for different tiers of subscription? Yes, you would have them in different groups and you would just go based off of those different groups. If they're in a group A or group 3 limited posts, you can, well, just check if they're in that group. If they are in that group, then your querying next would be checking how many posts they currently have and then updating that accordingly. Again, you could put those in the session variables as well, or the request session for that particular user. Any advice on the Django admin panel development library and tool? Reading the code, the Django admin code would be a good way to do this. Okay, so maybe like 3 more questions and then we'll call it a day. Thanks to everyone who asked all these questions. They've been really good, really insightful. I do appreciate it. These questions, believe it or not, actually help me too to understand what challenges you guys are having and where I might fill in. So if you do have other questions, be sure to check out the next live stream, or you can always leave them in comments after this one finishes. Let's see. Any resources on videos on Nginx to scale out that is load-based? Yeah, so I definitely cover this in, I think, my Django and Docker Composed series. I believe I do, where I use a load balancer up front to help distribute load through Nginx to various services using Docker and Docker Compose. But Nginx itself can easily reroute across different servers and reroute again across different services, including ports and stuff like that too. Pretty nice. Owen, I'm doing great. How are you doing? Or Oken, excuse me. A small DevOps roadmap, that would be a nice suggestion. I appreciate it. How do I start learning Python and what resources to master it? Thanks a lot, Professor Joaquin. So I recommend my 30 Days of Python series. It's meant for beginners. I have a lot of resources on how to install Python on your machine. To me, the best way to master something is to build a project, right? So 30 Days of Python has a number of projects that I came up with. How you'll get through humps, in my opinion, is to find a project that you're really interested in automating or using Python to solve, whether that's getting data, whether that's like emailing your friends to be annoying or funny. Python can absolutely help do all sorts of things in that realm. But once you pick a project, hopefully it's big enough that's motivating to get done, but small enough that it's achievable to get done, right? So like if you're trying to recreate literally all of Netflix, it's going to be pretty demotivating to get there. However, if you're trying to get all of the thumbnail images out of user uploaded videos through Django, OpenCV, and maybe MoviePy, that is a lot more achievable. It's still definitely challenging, but it's a lot more achievable. So yeah, I think I have a lot of resources on how to learn Python. And there's a lot out there that are really good. But my 30 Days of Python series is usually what I recommend people check out. And the 3.8 version is right here on YouTube as well. Yeah. So what would be my ideal roadmap for DevOps? Funny you should ask, Alex. I am actually working on something exactly like this. Literally an entire book, which will probably have a video series to go with it, that gives a roadmap for getting to um, pretty much getting to the latest cutting edge for DevOps. But I also have a try infrastructure as code series, which I think is definitely something that you might be interested in checking out as well. And also deploying Python web apps from scratch. Both of those things are on my website, cfe.sh. So check those things out if you're interested. I personally really like Terraform and Ansible for a lot of things with DevOps. Those things together, I think, are a great combination. But also, my deploy Python web apps from scratch series deploys a Python web application into a virtual machine in production. So you can understand all of the things that are going on. And for the most part, I think I use completely open source packages for that. Let's see. Can we still use a Django template with the Django REST framework? Absolutely. They're completely different, right? So the Django templating engine is for rendering HTML. The Django REST framework is for rendering and accepting JSON data. They're two different data types, but both can be used in tandem. And I've used both for years because they're amazing. Um, oh man, I said like two more questions, but I'm going to get to the last three from here, and that's it. No more questions, except for maybe next time. You have a website for jobs and services, and you need to send notification for logged in users. How? So as soon as a user logs in, there's something called a signals in Django that you can actually get from when they log in, especially if you use the Django All Auth package. There's a really good one in there. From that, you can then send them off a notification, uh, depending on what kind of notifications you say. Anyways, so I script my. No, I answered a question about Django multi-tenant. Sam, I'm not sure if maybe you asked another one and I missed it. Sorry about that. As you mentioned last time, deep learning is your go-to. How does it relate to Django? How do you relate to Django and data science? In other words, how data science can student from benefiting Django? Yeah, great question. Okay, so if you're a data science student and you're like, oh, why would I need a web application at all? Managing your data, right? So yes, you can absolutely manage your data by sending it to a database and just using like SQL Alchemy that doesn't touch Django at all, right? You can absolutely do that. However, when you want to get user data, what do you do? Do you put a Google form up? Maybe. Or you can start to build out a full on web application to just ingest data. So that's certainly a big part of it. What's also true is you can integrate Django with Jupyter notebooks and have those things run in tandem. So you can do analysis in Jupyter notebooks and build out models and complex things in those Jupyter notebooks and have it integrated within Django. The other part is you can use Django along with a worker process like Celery to actually manage all of your data science pipelines, right? And all of it's open source, so you're not necessarily paying additional to do all of these things. So yeah, there's a lot we could talk about there. I have an entire course on this that's coming out. It's not quite done yet, and it really integrates machine learning with Django, and it's on cfe.sh. It's called the Recommender course. I highly recommend that you check that one out because it's about a recommendation engine, and it's not using deep learning, but it does use machine learning, and you'll absolutely get a lot. I think you would get a lot from how you would manage the whole ecosystem with Django itself. Hopefully that answers your question. But data science is about data. So if you can't manage your data in a sustainable way, what do you end up doing? I think Django helps manage data in one of the most sustainable ways that you can, and it allows you to use users as well. So even if you're just using it to provide data sets to other people on your team, that alone can help a lot. Like, as in, you upload a big old file into Django that people on your team can download. That alone is a great tool that you could use for Django. That helps lock down your data set because, of course, you don't want those to be exposed. Now, there are, of course, downsides to using Django with data science and machine learning and deep learning, but I'm happy to elaborate more if you want. The deploy course on Django. No, it is not based on Django. It's based on Fast API. it actually might be on Flask. But the only reason that I didn't do it based on Django is because there's a lot of moving pieces to Django that I just didn't cover at that time for that. However, I did make another one. So let me just pull it up. So I have two actually. So I have two to deploy Django. Um, and I can't show it on here. So we've got a Django deployment pipeline. That one is absolutely based off of Django and also managed databases. And then I've got another one called Deploy Python Web Apps, very similar in terms of what the result is, except the Deploy Python Web Apps is almost everything from scratch and very little managed services, with the exception of renting virtual machines. So both of those I think are worth taking, and both of them are on my website right now. Man, I'm answering more questions. You guys are, I love you guys. This is great questions. Okay, so let's see. Following up on Nginx, can we change Nginx config to add more servers at runtime? Yes, absolutely. So the nice thing about Nginx is you don't actually have to take it down to make updates to it, right? That is like one of the coolest things about Nginx as well. Apache probably has that at this point now as well. Nginx, you can just reload and add additional servers. So you can both horizontally and vertically scale with Nginx gracefully meaning it doesn't go down, right? Assuming that your runtimes are going okay. And the other thing is you can have just a dedicated virtual machine for Nginx that runs your load balancer. This is probably recommended. Now, the only caveat to this is if you need to make your load balancer more robust, then you might have to, take that one down and bring up a new one. Um, there's ways to improve that and do that somewhat gracefully as well, but that's definitely outside the context here. But absolutely, updating Nginx configuration is something you'll do regularly. And I believe those two courses I just mentioned cover that. If they don't, just let me know. Shoot me a message on Twitter, and perhaps I can help you find it. Shoot me a public message. If you DM me, I don't always get the DMs because I get a lot of spam in DMs because for whatever reason, spam in DMs happens more than direct tags. But just tag me directly, and maybe we'll figure something out there. Joaquin, thanks for. You're currently day 15 on my 30 days of Python. It's awesome. Python is so broad and fun, and it's hard to choose a path. Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's where projects come in, right? So projects help to inform that path. If you have a great idea for a project, um, then you can just do little by little building out that project and thus building all of your skills, right? That I think is like certainly one of the ways that you can start to narrow down your focus with Python and what you're trying to accomplish or what you really want to do. This is true with any programming whatsoever, not just Python, right? So yeah, cool. Thank you, Mal. Appreciate it. You wish you could donate? Hey, no worries. I appreciate the comment. Hey, Clinton, what's up? I think we've talked before. Thanks for coming out. As a Django developer, is it necessary to learn a front-end framework like React that we consume RESTful APIs with Django's framework? Yeah, so it all depends. It really all depends on what your goal is, right? So if you want to build these really robust dynamic front ends, you can absolutely use React.js. You can also absolutely use HTMX. I'm going to say that time and time again because it should be known, right? So it's not necessary to learn the front ends per se. You don't have to learn the whole thing. I think what you could do is learn just the minimal amount to understand where everything else can go from there. As in, create a way to log in using React and the Django REST framework, how to grab those authentication tokens, and then do user-based requests after that, right? That's true with React.js, that's true with Vue, and that's true with HTMX. HTMX is definitely going to be the easiest of all of those to do that, but it is nice to see where to go from there. And you might, what happened to me with React, especially, so I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I need to do so much more with it. So I did, and then I started using Redux and all these other things with React, Redux, Django REST framework, and all sorts of front end stuff there. Absolutely future open. Glad I could help. Mal, when do you think you'll be able to? When do you think we'll be able to build a strong hybrid mobile apps for Android iOS with Python? I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever really will happen. Maybe, but I haven't seen really good ones. I know that Kiwi exists, and I'm sure there's like some great work that has been done on it. I just haven't seen the shining beacon of an example of like this is what you can do with Kiwi that nothing else out there that can do better. Like React Native can do the cross-platform stuff really, really well, where Python doesn't necessarily do that. And maybe at some point, Swift will be cross-platform if Apple wants to like grab more Android developers in their ecosystem. They might actually end up doing that, which is curious. Alex, you're not in the US, so you'd like to know the salaries of Django developers. Oh man, they're all over the board. So it's hard to say because it's like, well, are you a Django developer if you also know DevOps, right? Like, or are you a DevOps developer that knows Django? Which that person is quite a bit different in terms of developers. And also, are you a Django developer that knows React, or are you a Django developer that also knows machine learning, or do you just know Django and you don't know HTML, you don't know CSS, you don't know JavaScript? So it's kind of all over the board as far as what that could end up being. But I'm sure there's Django developers that make, $200,000 a year US, and there's probably some that make $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year, depending on your experience and all that sort of stuff. So it definitely has quite a range. That's probably a pretty accurate range for a lot of Django developers. Um, I would say the more likelihood is you're going to earn in the low six figures, right? Like around 100,000, depending on your experience with all of those other things. That's probably what you'll end up earning. But then again, if you have a ton of experience with those other things and you are an impactful developer beyond your technical skill, like you can lead a team or you can lead the strategy, then your salary starts to go up exponentially from there. So hopefully that answers that question. Oh man, you guys with the good questions, you're just keeping me in. Okay, so I'll answer a few more, like I just said like 30 minutes ago, and then I gotta go. Okay, have you ever thought about replacing Python with some high performance language like Golang or Rust? No, I have not thought about it because I can do so much more with Python in very little time than I can with Golang or Rust. I've definitely played around with both of them. It's just my speed to production is significantly lower. So the speed of Golang, Rust, or Python, um, I think matters less than the speed to get these things into production. Let's not forget that Instagram still runs Django to this day. Pinterest still runs Django to this day. So there are improvements to be had, but they're probably few and far between in terms of the actual runtime language itself that would make a huge impact on the user experience. It's going to happen over time, but Python's also going to get faster, and I'm sure we'll start to see a lot more things, but a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure side and how fast those things end up being that have very little to do with the actual runtime of the web application itself. At least that's my perspective at this point. You'd love to go live with me at any time like that. You're ready to part of this community. Thanks, appreciate it. Um, yeah, I think we probably need to have better interactivity with each other as well because you guys ask great questions. I'm sure you can help answer a lot of questions from others that are still trying to get out there. I guess like I don't know what the best place to build this community on would be, right? I've tried Discord a little bit, but the thing about Discord is like to get it really going, I feel like I need to be there constantly. And that is not sustainable for me. I can't be there constantly, unfortunately, right? So I would love to find a sustainable way for us to all do this. Perhaps it still is Discord, perhaps it's something else. Perhaps it's just going on live streams and you guys can sort of connect with each other in the comments. I don't know. You guys help me figure this out. And I think there's a lot we can do together because this community I think is very strong. As I can tell, every time I get these questions, even with just a handful of you, even if there's only 5 of you on these live streams, there's a lot of really good questions and things that we can really help each other out with. Again, with the mobile app question, do I think it can be done with Python or Cython or however you pronounce it? Uh, maybe. I don't know. I haven't spent much time with that. If I were to build an image processing GUI application with Python, which framework would you use? I would use the Python web view. I think that's what it's, or PyWebView for desktop applications. And I would use that in conjunction with some other Python process like OpenCV or Python image library. Now, if you're talking about a mobile application, I would probably not use Python on the front end, but rather use something on the back end. Have I ever thought about replacing Python? Oh, we already talked about this. Thanks for the question, though. I think it's good. I suppose I've thought about it, but I'm probably not going to do it. What apps would you recommend for testing Django, specifically in cloud environments for testing Django apps? So, like a staging Kubernetes, absolutely Kubernetes. So, really making a Docker container or container for your app and putting it into a staged environment, likely in Kubernetes, to then test it in somewhat of production. You can test it with a production database or not a production database or a production like database. There's a lot of different ways on how you go about doing that. I would love to go live with me, but will there be a time to have a platform for some of us? Oh, yeah. You'd love to go live with me. Appreciate it. I'll try to go live more often. Yeah. Uh, cool. I got to learn. Is it, as a Python developer, is it necessary to learn data structures and algorithms? That's probably true. I really got to go now, though. Thanks so much for coming out, guys. I just realized what time it was. Really appreciate the questions. They were really good today. Definitely hope to do more lives in the near future. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.